Welcome to the Boneyard with Steve Robertson. As always, I am your good friend and host, Steve Robertson. Here on the Maroon Friday edition of the Yard. You know the rock never stops. Never stops. Big weekend coming up, as you guys are well aware. Mississippi State will host the University of Arkansas. A lot of concern out of Fayetteville about not just KJ Jefferson, but the entire roster. They got some guys that are beat up. We're not going to see the best version of Arkansas. Let's just say that. And that's not to say that it's a guarantee we're going to win the ball game. I'm not trying to suggest that at all. But this is not an Arkansas team that is in good shape. Lost back-to-back games. They've had some injuries. They're really facing some adversity right now. It's going to be a real testament to the staff and the leadership of this team. They can come out and earn a victory on the road in the SEC. A lot of things against Arkansas right now. Not to mention the fact Mississippi State should have won the last two games in this series. But we didn't. Arkansas just found a way. And I've thought about this earlier this week. I thought about that 2020 game a lot. Arkansas had not won an SEC game in forever and a day. They make a coaching change up there to hire Chad Morris, who did nothing. It's incredible how you get into the college football world, you can kind of stay there. But they showed up here. We implode. Lose 21-14 when we really began to discover that KJ Costello wasn't going to be the guy we hoped. We had such high expectations, especially after that LSU ball game. We're like, you know what, between Leach and KJ Costello, we got it. We didn't. Salvage a little something out of the season, but that Arkansas game was an embarrassment. You know, we were on our way, we thought, to potentially compete for an SEC Western Division title. The euphoria following that LSU game was kind of unparalleled in recent years. We came crashing back to earth. Give Barry Odom a lot of credit for that. You have very first possession, State's kind of working our way down the field. You throw a pick six to Greg Brooks, and it was like an eerie feeling came over the stadium. But I think all of us thought, we'll be okay. We'll be okay. We'll be okay. And we kept driving down the field and never could cash in with any regularity. We lose the ball game. And then at that point, we thought, you know what? This is it. I remember Coach Chris Purnell, known coach a long time. I remember him putting out, maybe he's on Twitter or Facebook, and he goes, you know what? If a drop 8 is all it takes to beat it, man, we're in trouble. Well, that's true. But I think we've matured in the last 2 years that we can kind of attack that now. And I think the book on Mississippi State had been, maybe until this year, is that, you know what? If you just play bend but don't break against Mississippi State, at some point they'll screw it up. Right? I think it's different this year. I think it's much different this year. And I think one of the things, too, that maybe perhaps that we overlook is that these games that we're winning, they're not close. They're not close. And that's kind of what we envisioned when we began to put this thing together with Mike Leach. It's like, you know, we want to be an offensive team that scores a lot of points. And let's take a quick look back here together, if we may, if you'll indulge me here. Let's go back and look kind of what we've done the last couple of years offensively. Of course, you know, we put 44 points up in LSU in Leach's debut. We upset the defending national champions in their own backyard with, I don't know, about 25, 30% of attendance. The next week, we score 14 points. We're on the road at Kentucky. We score 2. Memory serves me correct, the only time in Mike Leach's tenure when you didn't have an offensive point. Texas A&M the next week, we score 14. We get shut out by Alabama, 41-0. We beat Vanderbilt, and at the time, that seemed like a big win, 24-17 in Starkville. They postponed the Auburn game. We go on the road and go play Georgia, and what do you know? We have one of our best offensive outputs of the year. But we lose 31-24. We go to Oxford for the Egg Bowl. We lose that game 31-24. Finally play Auburn again in Gus Malzahn's final game, and we lose 24-10. It wasn't until we played Missouri, after Will Rogers had had a few games under his belt, that you saw this offense kind of come together. And, of course, Missouri was stubborn, decided they would run man coverage. But you think about these numbers here. Other than the opening win of the season against LSU and the final game of the regular season, Missouri, guys, we didn't score any points. And that was the big thing. Oh, the air raid's not going to work. Air raid's not going to work. Air raid's not going to work. And a lot of people didn't want it to work. We want to go back to 3 yards of cloud dust and, probably produce these same totals. But in SEC play, which the full year was, we didn't average much. Other than the bookend regular season games, we didn't score points. And you think about that A&M game, we only scored 7 offensive points in that game. And, of course, A&M was good that year. They go 9-1 or 8-1, whatever it was. I know Ole Miss chickened out of the game. But, Emmanuel Forbes had a pick 6 in that game. So we weren't scoring points. And there was some concern. And we all thought, you know what? Well, not all of us. There were some of us that, in the minority, thought we'd be okay. But I think there are others out there who were like, not going to work, not going to work, not going to work. Okay, let's look at last year. Had to come from behind, but we beat Louisiana Tech, putting up 35 points. We needed every one of them. You beat NC State 24-10. You lose at Memphis 31-29. I know you don't want to relive that. 28-25. We lose to LSU. We win at College Station 26-22. We lose to Alabama 49-9. We got to score at least a touchdown against those guys this year. We go to Vanderbilt and we whip them 45-6. Beat Kentucky 31-17. Lose at Arkansas 31-28. Win at Auburn 43-34. Beat Tennessee State 55-10. Lose the Egg Bowl 31-21. And then we get demolished in Liberty Bowl with a diminished roster. But you start seeing these point totals begin to creep up a little bit, right? Outside of the ball game against Alabama, and it's difficult to judge anybody against Alabama. I don't care how good or how bad you are. We didn't score in the teens the entire year in the regular season. It's 21 points or above. So you started to see us score with greater proficiency. Well, let's look at this year. Now that our quarterback, one Will Rogers, a native of a family from Winston County, Mississippi. You look at this year, 49 against Memphis, 39 against Arizona, 16 against LSU. Certainly a step back. That's the outlier there. 45 against Bowling Green and 42 against Texas A&M. In our 4 wins, 39 points or more. That'll get it done. So again, you're seeing the maturation of a quarterback, of the offense, of maybe Mike Leach kind of getting his guys to run his scheme. I think it's important to understand that. And that we were rightfully expecting more this year. And so far, we're getting more. We'll see what happens tomorrow. But the reality of it is that the air raid is working. It is working. Let's thank our friends at Bulldog Burger Company. They're always working. Always working. Always working to give you a wonderful dining experience at an affordable price. I've shared with you guys before, one of the post-COVID things that I have probably, I don't know if upset is the right word to use, but maybe I've been disappointed in. There's a lot of restaurants were charging me a little bit more and giving me a little bit less. I get it. Everybody's got to make a living. But I like knowing that I can go to Bulldog Burger Company and get the full value of my dining dollar. That's a good thing. Bulldog Burger Company, 3 great locations to serve you. University Drive here in Stark Vegas. Be sure and go by and check out the patio area. Gloucester Street there in Tupelo. And the newest from Lake Harbor Drive there in the Ridgeland Flowood area. Go by, have the spring rolls as your appetizer. They'll make you and everybody around you better looking. We all need more of that. We do. It's science. It's in writing now. And that's the standard we're using these days. Because in writing, it's got to be true. Get that chocolate shake to go. I tell you, there's been so many great restaurant quality hamburgers I've had at Bulldog Burger Company. Sometimes it's difficult to put a finger on my favorite. Sometimes you just have a taste for something. But I love those Sloppy Joe sliders for lunch. And I love that BLT salad. You may like it fried, I like it grilled. I'm from South Mississippi, so I always get ranch dressing. Because we know in South Mississippi, we believe between, with duct tape, WD-40, and ranch dressing, we can cure just about anything. Well, you don't need the WD-40, and you don't need the duct tape when you go to Bulldog Burger Company. But you might want some ranch dressing, which is fabulous. Go by and check them out today. Bulldog Burger Company, the place where people go to meet, M-E-A-T. All right, let's run down the SEC here. I have a busy day ahead of me. Had a lot of fun last night. It was a busy day yesterday. It seems like every day is busy. Maybe it's just me. Some days I wish I could just sit around and watch Netflix. But I get bored with that. I got to get out and do things. I love this time of year, though, because there's so much football on. But had a good time last night. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show on our top 10 list. But let's look at the SEC. We're going to look at some numbers a little bit later here. But so Tennessee is at LSU. I think this is one of the most intriguing games, not just in the conference, but in the country. Now, I know it doesn't have the national ramifications that maybe some other ones do, because LSU, of course, ranked 25. And I don't think anybody fully expects LSU to truly contend for the West. I mean, I think that they're a winning team, but they're not the brand maybe they have been. And nobody expected them to be this year. Well, maybe some did, but we thought they'd be better, and they are better. Mississippi State still should beat them. I really like this Tennessee team. You look at their pass defense, not good. Not good at all. But offensively, these guys can get out and play. Now, LSU is decent on the back end, and maybe decent is underselling them. They're good. They're not great. They're not elite. They've been DBU, and they've got a couple guys out there that can make a few plays. But the reality of it is, not as good as they have been. Tennessee offensively is really good. I think this could be a very high-scoring game. Now, one of the things that I begin to think about that pass defense for Tennessee is, can Jaden Daniels exploit the weakness? Because, football is all about matchups, right? There are a lot of people out there, this team is terrible against the pass. Well, if you can't throw the football, it doesn't matter if they're terrible against the pass. Well, Steve, they're awful against the run. Well, we don't run it. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's so many things out there, some weaknesses jump out. It's all about matchups. This is one of those games I look at it and I'm like, I don't see a decided advantage for either team. I think it's going to be a super ball game. Now, of course, it'll be going on the same time that we're playing. We'll kind of keep an eye on that. But I like this Tennessee team. I think LSU can run the football a little bit against Tennessee. I don't think they can make a living doing it, though. And that's why I'm picking Tennessee. Again, it's about matchups. LSU wants to run the football. They have struggled to run the football. Of course, we wore down in our ball game down there in that fourth quarter. They had some big plays and kind of ground us out. And tip of the cap to them, they won the game. I think we're all going to look back and bemoan that all year long. Game we let get away. But I like Tennessee to win in Death Valley. And I don't know that I would have said that 2 years ago. But I think when you look at the trajectory of these two, I think Tennessee right now is on a higher trajectory, at least for this year. Like the Tennessee team. This is the Bill Martin Bowl. This is Steve, who's Bill Martin? Well, Bill used to be head of media relations at Mississippi State. Now he's at Tennessee. He is an LSU alum from Lake Charles, Louisiana. Love Bill to death, man. Great guy. Recently became a father. I joke with him now. He is Father Martin. If you're from South Louisiana, you get it. But I like Tennessee to win the ball game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I really do. I think LSU at home is good, but they're allergic to day games down there, and it's one of the things too that's so interesting to me. Like, I read this angst every time LSU has to play a day game. Well, the SEC office needs to understand this tradition. Everybody wants to play at night, Mr. LSU Bayou Bengal. We'd all love to be able to have the whole day to sit around with friends on campus and tailgate and, have finger foods and somebody make pulled pork or whatever and be able to sit around and congregate with friends and watch other games. We'd all love to be able to do that. It's not tradition for you. You've had some really good games over the years, so as a result, you've been in prime time on that ESPN spot. But it's not tradition. There shouldn't be this sense of entitlement that you guys should always be able to play at night. We all want to play at night too. We just don't always get to. And now you're stuck there with us playing 11 a.m. So ha! All right, moving along here, of course, Arkansas-Mississippi State game. Again, 11 a.m. for us. I'm going to make a pitch on this a little bit later in the game, in the show. But Arkansas at Mississippi State. We've had some success against these guys, but I don't think enough. And I read sometimes with great interest the Arkansas folks that think they should never lose to a Mississippi school. And I begin to ask myself, why do you think that? Because Sam Walton's family sent kids to Arkansas? I mean, come on. Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss are contemporaries. Whether you like it or not, Hog fans, that's the reality of it. And let me take it a step further. As college baseball has shown the last 2 years, Mississippi State has won an AFL championship. Ole Miss has won an AFL championship. Let me point out, Arkansas has never won the College World Series. And that's a sport that we respect you in, but this whole, line of thinking that Arkansas should never be on the same level as State and Ole Miss, it's just, that's antiquated thinking, man. It just is. And not that I'm here to defend Ole Miss in any respect, but, I look at this Ole Miss Arkansas series, and I think it's a little more intriguing even than the State Arkansas series. I think those games tend to be memorable, shall we say. Everybody remembers the Matt Jones, 7 overtime game? How ridiculous that was. It was crazy. It's a legendary game. It is. But I like State to win. Of course, we don't know. There's even some rumors that Arkansas is going to have some other guys that are going to be game time decisions. But I like State to win the game. I expected State to win the game before any of this stuff happened with KJ Jefferson. If KJ Jefferson doesn't play, I think State's going to win comfortably. I just don't think Arkansas is going to be able to score. Now, they'll cook some things up, of course, but, when you've got, limited personnel, it's difficult to experiment too much. And, of course, Fortin is more of the passing quarterback. Hornsby more of the running quarterback. They'll probably have some packages, and then you kind of tip personnel like that. And, it's like you can't run the bulk of your offensive scheme when you don't have a true dual-threat quarterback back there. And, again, I'm a KJ Jefferson guy. Love that guy, man. I'm very happy he's had some success at the University of Arkansas. He's a fine young man. Had a chance to meet his mom one day, too. A couple members of his family. He just didn't fit us. It's not a personal thing, right? There's so many kids out there that, that they leave and go to other schools, and people are like, oh, he should have came here. Yeah, it's hard for me to root against KJ Jefferson, man. I like the young man. It wasn't a great fit for us, and we've kind of got to deal with him now because he's in the SEC West. But you want the young man to get healthy. You do. Hope he makes a full recovery on Monday. All right, Missouri at Florida. This could kind of be a sneaky good game too. I just think in the end, Florida will be able to out-athlete Missouri. Florida, Missouri. This has been one of those, games, I guess, that you just kind of take for granted if you're Florida over the years. And you absolutely shouldn't. I mean, it's like, I'm sure when the schedule comes out, like the casual fan looks and says, oh, yeah, well, Florida will beat Missouri. Well, here's a little trivia question for you. Did you know that Missouri actually holds the lead in the series with the University of Florida? Did you know that? 6-5 in favor of the Missouri Tigers, including last year's win, 24-23. As you guys know, that was kind of the end of the Dan Mullen era. It's pretty crazy to think about that. The very first time that these two schools met was in the 1966 Sugar Bowl. Missouri won. Missouri joins the lead in 2012, so all of a sudden they become regular opponents. So Missouri has more than held their own with Florida. So I don't think Missouri is going to sit around and think, well, it's Florida. I don't think they're going to be intimidated by that. And of course, I don't know the Missouri running game is quite what it was last year. But this could be a sneaky good game. I still think Florida wins, though. I just think Florida at home, basically a little bit of a bye week last week, even though they played a game, stepping out against non-conference opponent. I don't think Florida's going to be great, but I think they'll be good enough to beat Missouri. And I think, too, we talk about matchups. Missouri has struggled to stop the run the last couple of years. Florida's going to run football. That's what they're going to do. That's what Napier's known for. You spread everybody out. You establish a power running game. You kind of boot off of it, that sort of stuff. But the reality of it is I just think in the end, the better team wins. I believe that it's Florida. I know that Missouri played well against Georgia last week and arguably should have won the game. But it's like when you get so close and you come up short, sometimes that's worse than getting blown out because the emotional investment is different, right? It's like, oh, we should have won, we should have won. Now, on the coaching side, you're like, you know what, this shows you how close we are. But you were at home against a team that was going through the motions. Speaking of that team, it was Georgia. Auburn is at Georgia. Me and the illustrious Hind Dog were speaking last night as I drove home from Huntsville. I think this is Georgia's get-right game. And though they have not been as dominant as of late, and that has surprised some people, and I don't know if that's fair. I mean, let's be honest. They did lose some very talented players off a team that won an AFL championship, right? And so you expect a little bit of a step back. And I think maybe, and if we're sitting here quibbling about a team that's 5-0, maybe we're being unfair. But, they blow out Oregon, and maybe we've overvalued that win over Oregon. I thought the Pac-12 had some teams ranked maybe artificially high, but, those guys on the West Coast got to vote for somebody, right? But Oregon's 4-1. I mean, it's not like they're just in the tank. They've won every game since then. Offensively, they put up a lot of points. They have scored 40 or more in every game since only scoring 3 against the University of Georgia. But then, then Georgia goes out and kind of goes through the motions against Samford. When you saw that game on a schedule, you're probably like me. Oh, it's going to be 65-0. Well, it was nothing, but it was just 33. And I think all of us kind of reconciled that and say, well, it's just Georgia cruising a little bit, not trying to embarrass an FCS team, putting some young guys in, letting them get some reps. That's the whole purpose of playing those games. The next week, they destroyed South Carolina in Columbia, 48-7. You think, okay, they're back on track. Everything's cool. And then they struggle with Kent State. They win 39-22, but Kent State made it a ball game. And you're like, how is this happening? Is there a lack of leadership? Is there a lack of focus within the Georgia Bulldogs camp? At the half, this ball game was 26-13. You never thought Georgia was in trouble, but they could never really just pull away. Kent State scored in every quarter. Georgia wins third quarter 6-3 and the fourth quarter 7-6. You can say, well, Steve, it's, they won the game. It was okay. And they did. And again, we try to make excuses and kind of explain this thing away. And then they go on the road and nearly lose to Missouri last week. And so you ask yourself, is there something wrong in Georgia? Not necessarily with Kirby or anything like that, at a program or the culture. I'm not trying to suggest that at all. But it appears there's a lack of leadership because, games like this, it's not just the big games against Florida and Tennessee and Alabama that your leadership has to stand up. Your leadership's got to stand up even more so in games like these. Let's go out there and take care of business early. And those are things I look at. And again, this was a 16-6 game against Missouri. Missouri up 10 at the break. And you think, oh, well, they'll be okay. Well, third quarter, Missouri defense stood tall. It's still a ball game. As we get ready to go to the fourth, it's 19-12 Missouri at home, number one team in the country. And you're starting to think it's going to be a magical night in Como. Georgia finally decides to start playing football, and they win 26-22. But so I ask you again, when you look at this Georgia team, and I really thought that they should have been number one in the country, even though they lost a lot on defense. But when you look at this roller coaster, and yes, they're 5-0, and again, you're nitpicking when you're undefeated and ranked third in the country. But there has been this roller coaster of emotions with them, and you begin to wonder, are they ripe for an upset? It won't come this week. I think Auburn's a team that is going to struggle. And again, kind of like that whole deal with with the emotional investment. Auburn at home had a 17-0 lead, and you lose, and you begin to wonder, if you're an Auburn Tiger, it's like, well, here we go again. I think Georgia gets right this weekend. And then they get Vanderbilt the next weekend. Because it's basically a 3-game homestand here. You host Auburn, Vanderbilt, Florida, Tennessee. And then the next road game, and I know Florida Georgia's the cocktail party. But the next true road game, start with Mississippi. Not making any prognostications, just point it out. Ole Miss is at Vanderbilt. Huge, huge ball game for the Rebels here. Huge. I mean, you throw out the record books anytime these two teams get together. You never know what's going to happen in these rivalry games. I think we know this time, though. I'll be honest with you. As much as I don't like Ole Miss, I got to tell you, I like the makeup of this team. I do. I think this Ole Miss team, and I've watched them a couple times, it's going to be interesting when they play teams that can stop the run, kind of how things go, when Jackson Dart has to kind of be a quarterback. But it's been interesting. But I don't know if you guys know this, but Vanderbilt has beaten the Ole Miss Rebels 40 times over the years. 40. They hadn't beaten them since 2018, though. So 3-game winning streak for the Rebels, and really, none of these games have really been close. I guess last year, if you remember, Vanderbilt defense did a really good job against Matt Corral. Corral was still kind of beat up back then, but probably should have been a bigger win for Ole Miss, but it wasn't. Vanderbilt defensively hung in there and played pretty well, just couldn't score. And I think that's kind of the case this week, too. I just don't think that Vanderbilt's going to be able to score. I think Ole Miss wins this game. I actually picked those guys to cover. I think Ole Miss I think they'll get after them pretty good. Now, again, when Vanderbilt and Ole Miss get together, crazy things have happened. And I'm not being silly, but there have been some times in the past that you think, Vanderbilt shouldn't even be in the ballgame, and it turns out that they are. And remember that wild game? I can't remember the Ole Miss player that scored. It's like it felt like Vanderbilt was going to win the game. I cannot remember that kid's name. He was a running back from Florida. And late in that ball game, somehow he gets loose, and Ole Miss scores a game-winning touchdown. I don't remember what year it was. It was a Hugh Freeze year. I guess maybe it was 13, maybe 2013. Where Ole Miss scored late. I mean, it's just weird things tend to happen. You remember, this is the game, too, where A.J. Brown actually had the catch, and then they reviewed it and said he didn't hold it long enough, and that was, I guess, back in maybe 18 or 19. 18. Vanderbilt wins that game 36-29. Weird things just happen. I just wonder when they're going to put a traveling trophy together for this rivalry. All right, so, again, I think Ole Miss wins big. South Carolina and Kentucky, a lot of intrigue about this game about Will Levis. It's a game-time decision. Everybody saw his hand on TV in that Ole Miss game, where his fingers pointed the wrong direction. It's one of those things, every position, with the exception of quarterback, you could probably just tape that thing up and keep rolling. Put some type of bandage or some structure there to give it some support. You can't do it as a quarterback. So it'll be about how he feels. And I know that line is kind of jumped up and down because of the news about Will Levis, but we'll see. A lot of quarterbacks beat up right now. KJ Jefferson's beat up. Max Johnson may be out for the year for A&M. And now Will Levis is beat up. It's a physical game in a physical league. I still like Kentucky to win the game. I think at home, I think Kentucky, they lose last week. And it's kind of a shock to the system because you've kind of convinced yourself and all your friends in the media who said you're going to be the second team in the West. And I remember in the East, and there were some people that were picking Kentucky to beat Georgia. And maybe they will. I don't see it. I think the talent differential between the two programs is just too great. But South Carolina going to make the trip to Kentucky. Rodriguez is back. Had a decent game last week. That offensive line is not good. And so sometimes you need a guy that can make plays on his own, at least a little bit, give him a little bit of a crease. I like Rodriguez. I think he's a really good player. But the reality of it is I don't think South Carolina is nearly as good as maybe their fans think. And I think that's going to come to fruition this week. But Kentucky's won 2 in a row in the series. South Carolina actually leads the series 18-14-1. But over the course of the last, 9 seasons here, Kentucky's won, 8 of 9? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 of 8. The lone win came in Columbia in 19, a 24-7 win for South Carolina. But these games have been kind of ugly games that have kind of gone down to one possession. So I suspect this could be one, too. I know Kentucky's line was a little bit bigger earlier in the week, but just something to watch when it comes to quarterback health. But Kentucky, they're an 8-4 team, guys. That's what they are. I mean, I don't know who in the Southeastern Conference media has started this thing, with Kentucky to suggest they're going to be a contender in the East every year. They've had some good seasons under Stoops. I'm not trying to diminish that, but they're not the program that many people in the Southeastern Conference football media suggest they are. All right, Texas A&M is at Alabama. We'll all be able to get home and watch that one. Interesting subplots here. Again, Bryce Young, another quarterback, is kind of beat up. We expect him to play. But it's been a difficult week for SEC quarterbacks. A lot of backup quarterbacks getting first-team reps this week. This could be a battle of the backup quarterbacks. I don't know that A&M is not better off without Haynes King as the quarterback. And I know some Aggie fans that may listen to the show will be like, oh, well, we've already tried that and it failed. Well, now that you don't have Anaya Smith and you're going to be basically a run-first team in every aspect, you might want to have that running quarterback. And I don't mean like Max Johnson, a guy that can get outside. I'm talking about a guy that you can design quarterback runs for. It might be the way to go. To keep people off I-chain, you give Haynes King running his own read and some option-style stuff, and next thing you know, maybe perhaps you can open up the running game even more, because I don't think the passing game is going to be maybe what you expected it to be anyway. You just got to find a way to manage a season and win ball games. And if Johnson is truly done for the year, I haven't seen an official announcement yet. Probably going to have to change some things up, Jimbo. But what a difficult position Texas A&M is in. And this is, Ross Bjork, we know him well. He's really put A&M, when they extended Jimbo, and really for no reason at all. They extend Jimbo, and what is the buyout now, $95 million? I mean, you're in year 5, and you're looking at another mediocre season, and you begin to kind of ask yourself, what becomes of A&M football? What if this is who Jimbo is? What if Jimbo is a 7-5, 8-4 coach, despite all your resources? And what if you can't gain any ground in the SEC? Those are things that I begin to ask myself. Is like when you're all in, and listen, A&M is all in, second highest budget in the NCAA when it comes to athletics. Renovated Kyle Field, leading the charge for NIL, no matter what they say, right? I think it's interesting. You can't afford to fire him. And I know there's enough money in the world, out there to kind of make some things happen. But $95 million, you talk about historic moments in college football. But looking back here at the Jimbo Fisher era, it began in 2018. They go 9-4, counting the win in the Gator Bowl. So an 8-4 regular season. 2019, they go 7-5 in the regular season. They win the Texas Bowl to finish 8-5. And of course, they have the one 2020. They go 9-1, win the Orange Bowl. And then last year, 8-4. And then didn't play in the ball game because they had some guys sick or whatever and they were beat up. Well, we did too. We went and played the ball game and we lost. And I still respect the fact that our young men wanted to go play. And now they're 3-2. And so in 5 years, because I'm going to go ahead and get ahead of myself here and say that A&M is not going to have a 10-game regular season. They'd have been better off keeping Kevin Sumlin if this is the results that they expected to get. Now, granted, they've been a ranked team every year. They're not now. They've been a ranked team at some point through the season. And a lot of that, too, again, I think there's some people in the SEC media that kind of do that by default. Oh, well, this is the year. No, it's not the year. I don't think that year is ever going to come, guys. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just me. I just don't think it's going to work out. That's not to say that, Jackie Sherrill didn't have some great teams. R.C. Slocum had some good teams there. Francione and those guys, put together a couple of decent seasons. But, never could really get over the hump. Kevin Sumlin had, the one big year, I guess, in 2012. It kind of helps when you get, an iconic player like Johnny Manziel. People forget he was headed to Oregon. It's crazy. But this A&M stuff is just so intriguing to me because you talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place. That's exactly where the Texas A&M Aggies are. Absolutely stuck between a rock and a hard place. And they're going to get the rub this weekend. I think Alabama beats them well. I think after all the stuff that's happened, I think Nick Saban smells blood in the water. And Nick Saban does his best talking through his team, not to his team. And I think that Alabama gets those guys back at home. Remember, A&M beat them last year. Bryce Young didn't play well. And maybe Bryce doesn't play at all. Who knows? I think no matter what happens, I think Alabama's going to be able to run football in A&M. And I don't think A&M can score. And I think we're going to see probably a big blowout. So your winners again. Tennessee, Mississippi State, Florida, Georgia, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Alabama. And probably the one I'm the most worried about is that South Carolina-Kentucky game because you just don't know how that team would respond perhaps with a backup quarterback. All right, time for today's Top 10 list is always brought to you by closewithblair.com. That's CLOSE with Blair, B-L-A-I-R, closewithblair.com. Blair Chandler is my friend, your friend, a friend to everybody in need when it comes to the mortgage industry. Top 1% close ratio in the country back-to-back years, 21 years of experience. Blair's the guy that gets things done. We talk about coffees for closers. Blair gets plenty. If anybody can get your loan closed, it's Blair. Maybe you are an atypical borrower with a non-conforming property. Here's the deal. The reality of life is you need somebody who's been there, that's done it all, and seen it all. That's Blair Chandler. Give him a call or text today, 601-500-2344. Again, 601-500-2344. Blair's the guy that'll get you taken care of. Looking to refinance? Looking to buy a home perhaps for the first time? Look no further than Blair Chandler. Again, that's closewithblair.com. Mention to him you heard about him on the Boneyard. He'll pay for your appraisal. One less fee you got to pay. All right, top 10 list. Last night, had a really cool moment. Really cool moment. Earlier this week, I found out that John Corabi was playing in Huntsville with Brother Kane. I like Brother Kane. They've reunited. They're playing. Damon Johnson, those guys are killer. I didn't stay for their full set. I went to go see John Corabi. I have several friends in the music industry. I have a friend that said, hey, are you going to see John? I said, well, it's going to be tough because I got a big weekend ahead of me. He said, well, listen, I'll set it up, and you can go hang with John before the show, kind of get to know him. He said, well, Steve, who's John Corabi? Well, John Corabi wrote and performed one of my favorite albums of all time. It's a band called The Scream. Unfortunately, that album is not available on the digital streaming platforms. You can find it on YouTube and listen to it in its entirety. I own the CD. One time I was on my way to a show in New Orleans, And sometimes we would go by Tower Records because they had better selection than what we had at the small town Walmart there in Columbia, Mississippi. Wasn't like it is today. You can go get on Amazon, order a CD, and it's sent directly to you. You can probably get that Scream CD on eBay or Amazon. You can also get it now in digitally enhanced vinyl, which I picked up last night. But the Scream, that album from start to finish is outstanding. Probably my favorite song on that album is a song called Outlaw. But since it's not available on the streaming platforms, I didn't include it in our top 10 list. But you talk about a banger, it's a good straight-ahead rock and roll song. That's the one right there. It is the lead track on that album, and it'll rip your face off. So be careful. But John also went on to be the second singer in Motley Crue. And you know what a Motley fan I am, right? So I had a chance to go visit with John Corabi, the second singer in Motley Crue. He was the singer on the self-titled album. And to be fair, I don't think a lot of people were fair to John. That album has a lot of grit to it. I love that album. I think it's Mick and Tommy's finest work. But Vince got fired. They hired John Corabi. John never talked any trash about Vince. They're still friends to this day. They still talk. There's no bitterness between the two. I mean, John was a hired gun. His Motley began a new era. It didn't work out, to no fault of John's, but a lot of people never accepted Motley without Vince. I get it. Again, I love Motley. You know, as I told John last night, before I left, I said, dude, you fronted my favorite band of all time. We're family. Ended up actually, it's funny how life works. I go meet John. We're sitting there and we're just kind of talking about that Motley record and talking about the Scream and his time with Union and the Dead Daisies. And it's time for John to get ready and go do sound check. And he doesn't have anybody to sell his merch. And he looked at me. And I said, John, do you need me to watch your stuff? He goes, well, do you mind selling a little bit? And I said, John, I'm happy to do it. So I ran John Corabi's merch table last night. New experience for me. Not that I'm, opposed to getting out and selling. I sell a lot of things on this show. But I saw John Corabi merchandise last night. And if you were in Huntsville, Alabama at the show, at the Furniture Factory, which is a really cool venue, nice little patio area out there, pretty big patio area. Everybody kind of gets to sit and chill. Crowd got up. It was great. John played about 40 minutes. Even worked in a CCR song. That's Have You Seen the Rain? He did an acoustic set. It was fabulous. But I want to introduce you to the music of John Corabi. Now, those of you that know me as a rocker understand that my tastes are pretty diverse, as is John's catalog. I think John's amazing with the full band. But he might even be better acoustically, and that's what he played last night. So I'm going to give you my top 10 songs that are available on the digital streaming platform. I've already sent this to Roy, so we have a list up. The most recent single from John is a song called Cosabella. I love it. I think you'll love it too. Vocally, I think it's a masterpiece. I think John's the guy too that maybe has not gotten his just due in life. He wrote a book, which I now have a signed copy of. Thanks, John. It's called Horseshoes and Hand Grenades. Talk about getting close. And that's kind of the story of John Corabi's career. And I don't know that he is truly appreciated. He does the Monsters of Rock cruise every year, and he's done every single one of them. They call him the mayor. But Cosabella, a new track, it's just difficult to play that thing live. All right, number 9, from the Union debut album. Union was a band, too, that he formed with Bruce Kulick of Kiss. Super album. I think they've done 2 albums, I guess, plus a live album. But we're going to go with Who Do You Think You Are? A little profanity on this one, too, so be careful with it. Maybe you get kids in the car. From the Union, number 9, Who Do You Think You Are? Number 8, from the Dead Daisies, and of course that's a bit of a super group. And don't rule out perhaps John doing some things with the Dead Daisies in the years to come here, which would be great. John deserves a bigger audience. But it's a great song, and he played it last night. Something I Said, off the Dead Daisies album. That's the Revolution album. Probably the most highly anticipated Dead Daisies album. All right, number 7, to the Motley self-titled album. It's probably my favorite song on that album from start to finish. I didn't rank it higher because there are some hits on that album, but I love this one. It's Till Death Do Us Part. And I love the part, that probably my favorite lyric in it, and I don't know if John wrote it or Nikki Sixx wrote it, but sometimes my words may cut too deep and I step on a toe or two. I'm half dead, barely half alive, but I live by the truth. Truer words never spoken. Till death do us part. All right, number 6, a song that John released here a couple years ago, and he spoke about it at length last night about how important it is to let the people that you love know that you love them. Because you never know. And it was basically inspired by some gun violence, about some random acts like that. You leave the house one day and you never know you're going to step into eternity before the day is over. And so the song is entitled If I Never Get to Say Goodbye. And of course, it's on his Unplugged album, which is super cool. The arrangements are a little bit different too, but a lot of it is super cool. But also too, there's also a live album out there where you can find that Motley self-titled album played in its entirety that recorded at the Monsters of Rock Cruise, and John's son on the drums. But If I Never Get to Say Goodbye, a very poignant and emotional song in many respects. And I echo his sentiments too. At the end of the day, all we really have is each other. No matter how much money we make or how little we make or what all we have and what kind of cars we drive, at the end of the day, all we truly have are each other. Number 5, also from the Union album, it's Love, I Don't Need It Anymore. It's a breakup song, It's a cool track, and if I remember correctly, this was kind of like a song that John had been kicking around for a while. And I don't know if it was like post-Scream, pre-Motley, or after, but Love, I Don't Need It Anymore, great track. I think you'll dig that one. Number 4, another one of these very emotional songs that several people have actually had played at funerals. And it's from that Scream album. And John said when he pitched that song to the Scream, the band didn't like it and said, hey, it's kind of like a country song. And I guess in some ways it does have a little bit of a twang to it. But it's a song called Father, Mother, Son. And it is about losing someone close to you. Very emotional song. As a matter of fact, when he played it last night, I saw a couple people kind of tear up. You never know what people are dealing with. It's an amazing song. And I encourage you, if you don't know it, to get to know it. And I love the Scream album version, but I think the Unplugged version might actually be a little bit more emotional. All right, number 3, and this is a great song too, from that Motley self-titled album. I told John last night, it's one of my favorites on the album. It's a song called Drift Away. And I love Mick Mars' work on this thing too. It's very haunting when his guitar comes in. He tells me Drift Away almost didn't make the record. And it just seems weird to me. It's just such an amazing song. But he said that when he wrote it, he presented it, they recorded it, that some people with the record label and Motley's management just said, I don't know if it works for Motley. And John finally said, you know what? I love this song. I believe in this song. And so if you don't want to use it, give it back to me, and I'll put it on a solo record someday. It is absolutely killer. I close my eyes. I slowly drift away. It's one of the, again, John Corabi, I don't think gets enough credit for his role as a songwriter. And I know that Nikki Sixx has said some negative things about John, and that's unfortunate too. I really hate that. It's not John's fault that he took a great gig fronting one of the most iconic bands in American rock and roll history, and things didn't work out. But Nikki has said before that John Corabi can't write lyrics, and as much as I love Nikki Sixx, I have to disagree. Drift Away is an absolutely beautiful song. Number 2, this is the first single off that self-titled album. And I think when we first heard this, we were like, Motley's going in a much heavier and more serious direction. A little less stripper, a little less spandex, a little more leather, and a little more grit. It's Hooligans Holiday. And of course, he played kind of a, as he called the swamp version, kind of a tuned down, slowed down acoustic version. And the crowd, of course, sang along. It was great. But Hooligans Holiday, an amazing song in the Motley Crue catalog. And there are a lot of people like, well, Steve, I like it. And you never really gave that album a chance because you were still hung up on the fact that Vince got fired. I'm just telling you now that Vince is back with the band and they're selling out stadiums around the country, You owe it to yourself to go back and listen to that self-titled album. You do. There's some great rock and roll on that album. Living in the Know is another one that I absolutely love. I mean, that album, I can listen to it in its entirety on trips and really enjoy every aspect of it. And then, John wrote some of the songs for Generation Swine, too, and then they brought Vince back. And Generation Swine, to me, is the worst album in the Motley catalog. And I think a lot of it is because things were so disjointed. The record company insisted that Nicky and the guys bring Vince back, and you had this material that was kind of written for John Corabi to sing. And I just think that album, it's kind of like when Motley kind of pretended to be punk. It just didn't work out. It is, without a doubt, the worst Motley album in my estimation. But that self-titled album is absolutely legit. Hooligans Holiday, be sure and check it out. But number one for me, the song that got me into John Corabi's music. I was on my way to a show in New Orleans back in 1991. And we stopped at that Tower Records and bought this. Well, the reason that I stopped and bought that Scream CD, they only had 2 copies on the shelf. I bought them both. Bought one for me and one for a friend. On my way down there, I heard this song on the radio. I was like, who is that? And it was the Scream. And the title song is Man in the Moon. And, of course, John closes his set with it. An amazing song. If she never comes back, it'll be too soon. I'm doing fine, just me and the Man in the Moon. It's an amazing song. And the acoustic version is really good, and that's what you're going to hear. But if you can find the full band version, and you can find it on YouTube or perhaps buy the album, I'm telling you, I cannot recommend that Scream album, the Scream, Let It Scream. I cannot recommend that album enough. An amazing, amazing record. Man in the Moon, though, that's the one that kind of carried him. And really, that's what got him the gig with Motley. Nikki Sixx has said in interviews that he was really impressed with that album. And the production value on that album is absolutely legit. Chad from Faster Pussycat and I have talked about that how Bob Rock has absolutely outdid himself putting that thing together. So there you go, the music of John Corabi. I know many of you are unfamiliar with John, but after meeting him last night for the first time and spending some time with him, you really get a sense of what a genuine person he is. So I wanted to do a top 10 to kind of promote the music of John Corabi. And some I ask you, just give it a shot and just listen to it. And if it works for you, then great. If it doesn't, that's cool too. We'll still be friends. But John Corabi, an amazing musician and an amazing guy, man. It's being around him and having a chance to kind of talk to him, about some personal things and kind of about some things that are happening in his life. And you just see what it all means to people. There are a lot of us out there that have cooler jobs than others. But at the end of the day, we're all just people kind of dealing with the same stuff. And, John's not a big drinker and that sort of stuff. But I tell you, sitting and talking with him, he was intrigued that I was an author that have had 5 very successful books. And he's got a book on the market and gave me a signed copy. I gave him a signed copy of Bloom's Oleander. So you never know how life works. But it's so interesting to me that I've been a fan of this guy now for, 30 years, and finally got a chance to meet him and shake his hand. And as I wrote in his copy of Blooms of Oleander, to John, thanks for your contributions to rock and roll. And there's so many people out there that we never get a chance to truly say thank you to, people that are part of the soundtrack of our lives. And I'm very honored that Brian Jones, my friend from Jackson, was able to set this up for me. And got home late. I was going to record the show last night, but I was absolutely exhausted. And I got to pull a full day again today, too. And as we head down for the Lillian Axe album release party, album's been out a few weeks, but looking forward to going down there and being with my family in Lillian Axe. But so last night I wore a Lillian Axe show to John Corabi show, and I wore a John Corabi shirt tonight to Lillian Axe show. But check them out. John, again, and I can't emphasize this enough, there are a lot of people out there that are making music, and you never know what kind of people they are. I can tell you, because John and I have so many mutual friends, and now that I have had a chance to meet John, I can tell you, one of the nicest guys in rock and roll, and it's so crazy. He gave me his phone number last night, and he said, hey, I don't want this to be weird, because I know we just met for the first time. He goes, but I know you drove a long way to come hear me play. He said, just text me when you get home, so I know you made it back okay. And he goes, man, thanks for selling all this merch. And I did sell a bunch of it, to be quite honest with you. I got the gift of gab. And so as people walked up, I did my best to sell John's merch, and we sold some books and some CDs and sold some vinyl, sold a bunch of shirts. But I was happy to do it. And it's one of those nights, too, that I always look back. And remember that time I sold John Corabi's merch? Yeah, the second singer from Motley. Man, it's such, sometimes I feel like a kid. You know, it's like when I get a chance to go do cool stuff, I want to go do it. But never in a million years did I think I'd be selling merch for John Corabi. And I even told him when I left, I said, dude, if you're ever within a reasonable driving distance, I don't have anything going on, hit me up. I'm happy to come help out. I think that's one of the things that makes the rock scene a little bit different. Is there is a fraternity. You know, it's like the fans and that kind of stuff. People get real negative about things, and I'm guilty of that sometimes too. You know, I let people's fans get on my nerves, but you know, there is a fraternity among those artists that we're not a part of. But to watch it in person and to see all of that kind of unfold and the respect they have for each other is very rewarding. I wish life was more like that all the way around. But it's interesting, too, when John's getting ready to go on stage, and we've already had this great visit, and he kind of looked at me, you know, and I could tell he was scared to even ask if I'd be willing to sell for him. And I was just like, you know, when else am I going to get an opportunity to do something like this and to help somebody out that has helped me out so much, kind of unbeknownst to them? Their music has been a big part of my life. So I was happy to do it. I don't feel like I'm name dropping here. I'm doing this to promote John Corabi. I'm doing this because I think many of you will appreciate the music of John Corabi, and it is very diverse, but it's straight ahead rock and roll. So be sure and check it out. If you have an idea for the top 10 list, reach out, let me know. We might just do it. The best thing to do is hit Roy up on Twitter at Dogmatic67. That's DAWGMATIC 67. And you can find our great list on Spotify also at Dogmatic67. But I'm telling you again, if you're just looking around for a great album or whatever, find your way to get your hands on that first Scream album. You'll be glad you did. And yeah, I like the Union stuff. I like the Dead Daisy stuff. Of course, I love that Motley album. But that Scream album, to me, one of my favorite albums of all time, without a doubt. All right, next segment of the show brought to you by your friends at Campus Bookmart. Campus Bookmart, a Starkvillian institution. Go by and check them out today. The biggest selection of Mississippi State merchandise. A lot of people make that claim, but they are pretenders to the throne. Bully Shop has been completely renovated. It's all upstairs now. They've expanded the selection. Every time I go in there on ballgame weekends, it's absolutely packed. Sometimes I go in there and sign books for them, and it is always packed. It was always pretty busy before. They've hit a new level now. I think because word is out that you can find more Mississippi State merchandise right there at Campus Bookmart. You owe it to yourself to go by and see their smiling faces. They will treat you like family because in their minds you are family. If you can't make it to town, let me encourage you to support a Starkville business by visiting them on the World Wide Web at campusbookmart.net. Here's the reality of that. We're going to save you a little money. Campusbookmart.net, promo code BSR, which stands for Beautiful Steve Robertson. That gets you free shipping on all orders over $50. Any order less than $50, absolutely incomplete. Again, that's campusbookmart.net. Let's look inside some numbers here. A lot of stuff going on around here. All right, so Will Rogers now leads the Southeastern Conference with 1,715 yards passing. Now, you would expect that, you know, because of the scheme that we play in. And I think sometimes Will Rogers is kind of unfairly maligned at times because of the fact that he plays in this system. Of course, he leads in just about every statistical category, including completion percentage, just over 73%. Now, the guy right behind him, who I would say right now is the odds-on favorite to be first-team All-SEC, is Hendon Hooker. Now, granted, he's thrown half the passes that Will has, a little bit less than half. But he's right there at 72%. Yards per attempt, though, 1056. So, you know, not throwing it as often, but throwing it a little farther down the field than other guys. Passing touchdowns, Will, of course, leads. 19 touchdowns for Will. Bryce Young, second with 14. Will Levis with 12. And despite the fact that we throw it as many times as we do, Will with just with 3 interceptions, and a couple of those not his fault. You know, one at LSU I'll put on him. And you would think as many times as we drop back, you'd say, well, you know, Steve, Will's probably getting tagged a lot. Well, just eight times. Will Levis from Kentucky, 19 times. 19. Ole Miss kind of got after that Wildcat offensive line last week. Jaden Daniels, the mobile quarterback that gave us trouble, he's been sacked 15 times. Spencer Rattler, another dual threat guy, 10 times. And then Max Johnson 10 times, Mississippi State part of that too. But Hendon Hooker and Will right there at 8. Kind of a glut right there at 8 with 5 quarterbacks with 8 sacks. Quarterback rating. Hendon Hooker leads the league at a 183.73. It's absolutely ridiculous, man. And then there's Will Levis, Bryce Young, KJ. Will Rogers, 5th in the SEC in quarterback rating with a 158.87 quarterback rating. But, Will getting it done. Obviously when you would expect, him to have some big numbers in this scheme. But here's the thing. We run the air raid. We need a prolific quarterback. We have one. All right, the leading receiver in the Southeastern Conference from a yardage standpoint is Dominique Lovett from Missouri. That's interesting, right? Tavion Robinson is 2nd at 365. Will Shepard from Vanderbilt, and of course he has an extra game on us. I made that mistake a while back. But Thomas now, they had this basically as a tie. Yeah, Tavion Robinson. So the third highest receiving yards total on the season is Thomas. That guy's on his way to an all-SEC season if he can keep it up. And he had a bad game against Bowling Green and had a couple big drops against LSU, but he bounced back strong this week. So good numbers there. Looking down the list for some more Bulldogs. Caleb Ducking, 15th to 272. Rufus Harvey, 24th to 229. Tulu Griffin there at 206, down at 28th. Now, look at receiving touchdowns here. Will Shepard from Vanderbilt leads the SEC with 7, but second there is your guy, Caleb Ducking, with 6. That'll get it done. Tied for 4th in the league with 3. But Ducking putting together a really big season. And we hoped for that. We saw it in fall camp, but it doesn't always translate that well, right? Well, we're getting it done. Of course, the running numbers are not going to be to our advantage, shall we say. But Raheem Sanders, we're going to see him this weekend. Raheem Sanders, 609 yards, leads the SEC. Ole Miss freshman Quinshon Judkins, 535 yards. And a lot of people talked about, I don't know. They talked about his transfer running backs, and they're good. But you got Judkins, the freshman. They're leading, now second in the SEC. Devin Achane from A&M is 3rd at 466. Ray Davis from Vanderbilt, 402. And there's Zach Evans. So Ole Miss with 2 of the SEC's top 5 rushers. We knew there would be a transformation offensively. There has been. The top Bulldog on the rushing numbers, number 11 in the SEC, is Dylan Johnson with 302. Which is probably, all things considered, pretty good. KJ Jefferson, just 312. And DJ's right there with him. Interesting to say the least. But, Tank Bigsby's the guy at Auburn. If they could just put together any sustained drives offensively, Tank's the guy that was preseason All-SEC. And on his own, he's a remarkable back. He's just not getting enough opportunities because they can't sustain drives. He's 7th in the SEC. Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama right there at 6. But, the fact that states anywhere even smoking, when smoking, I look at Cavassier smoke as I said that. Within shouting distance, it's pretty impressive. All right, scoring numbers here. Now you got all these kickers up here. But the position player that has been the most prolific this year is running back Marshawn Lloyd from South Carolina. He has scored 48 points, which is more than many kickers. And then Will Shepard from Vanderbilt. He has done a good job, too. The leading scoring receiver in the Southeastern Conference. Pretty impressive. And then Judkins from Ole Miss and Caleb Ducking are tied with 36. It's interesting, like every year you think you've kind of got it figured out, and then like somebody new just kind of comes out of nowhere, whether it be a freshman or somebody gets better, somebody gets, they kind of figure some things out. They become a better player. They have that breakout season. It's always interesting, always. Kick returns here. Devin Achane still leads the SEC. We helped him last week with a couple times not kicking the ball in the end zone. 274 yards returned. Tulu Griffin still second in the SEC with 216. And then Kearis Jackson is third there at 177. Jimmy Holiday, a name you may know, from Tennessee, 152. So, one big return away, I guess, from dropping, but also one big return away from catching Devin Auchin. It always feels like Tulu is just one away. I don't know that we're going to get a lot of opportunities to return kicks, but I think we'll get a chance to return some punts, which will be interesting. Should be. And, Xavion Thomas, I think, is a guy that has a chance to do some interesting stuff here. When we look at yards per return, and which is probably the best assessment, considering that not everybody gets a chance to return these. But Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama leads the SEC, just under 18 yards per return. Bryce Stevens from Arkansas, the second most prolific punt returner in the SEC, 14 and a half yards thereabouts. And then Josh Vann from South Carolina. And then there's your Bulldog, Xavion Thomas, 12.71 yards per return. And if we're getting double-digit averages on these punt returns, I think we can live with that. I still think Xavion, there's a couple times, I'm sure when he went back and watched film, he probably thought, you know what, if I'd cut back here, cut back there. He has been very close to breaking one. Is this the week? Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Let's look at our kicking numbers here, too. And yes, we have to. All right, Ben Rabin, of course, 4 of 5 on the year. It seems worse, right? But it's not. It's not. We missed a couple extra points, which stinks. We should never miss those. That should be automatic. But 4 of 5 in the league. Nobody has been perfect. I guess with the exception of Mitch Jeter. He's 5 for 5. But everybody else around the league has missed at least one kick. So we're kind of right there with them. But Georgia, Missouri, 13 attempts. That's interesting. I mean, it's like more than double most of the teams in the league. And Harrison Mevis from Missouri, I don't know if you guys know this. He's three kicks from 50 yards plus. Insanity. Absolute insanity. All right, looking at punting numbers here. Matt Hayball from Vanderbilt leads the league in yardage. And I think that's because they're punting more than everybody else, 28 punts on the year. The better barometer here is going to be average yards per punt. Well, guess what? Hayball still leads. 46.61. That'll get it done right there. Maybe that kid needs to get a transfer portal. Jack Stonehouse, 45 from Missouri. You got to get down a little bit. State's got a couple guys that are sharing their opportunities there, so they're not registering on the chart. They hadn't met the NCAA requirements. But Arkansas punter Max Fletcher, this is one of the reasons that I believe Xavion has a chance. Last in the SEC among those who qualify in punting yards per average, 38.8. Not even getting 40, 38.8. Not going to be great punts. Maybe they can cover them. Call it a sneaking suspicion. I just think that perhaps Xavion's going to have a chance to make a play. All right, let's look inside the defensive numbers here. This is always interesting to me because you just never know. Like, you look around and you're like, wow. Okay, so Arkansas actually has 3 in the top 8. You think that's pretty incredible, Steve, and it is. But all of them are guys in the back 7. Bumper Pool, Drew Sanders, Simeon Blair, a safety, which means people are getting the second level a lot, right? Which is kind of the whole purpose as linebackers, right, as you go fill a gap. But, State with 2 in the top 7, Boogie Watson and Jed Johnson. Jed Johnson second in the SEC with 46 tackles. I'm going to go back to the preseason, pre-SEC picks, and I told everybody how ridiculous it was that Jed Johnson didn't get any notoriety at all. The fact that Jed didn't make one of those teams, I'm not saying he should have been first team, but the fact that he didn't make any tells me that a lot of people in the SEC media don't do their homework. If I remember correctly, Jed was either 6th or 7th in the SEC in returning tacklers, like in guys that had production last year. Well, Jets just rising to the occasion. Second in the SEC now, tied with Bumper Pool with 46 tackles. Anthony Orjai from Vanderbilt is 52 tackles. He leads the SEC. And granted, they're a game ahead of us. So you look at Jet, Jet's got a realistic chance to lead the Southeastern Conference in tackles. Got to keep working hard, but he does. The next Bulldog on the list, of course, is Boogie Watson down at 7. Now, his numbers will dip a little bit this week. He's going to miss the first half. J.P. Purvis now in line to start, get his first college start. That's exciting for him. The next Bulldog on the list, you say it's got to be Tyree. Nope, it's DeCamp, tied for 12th in the conference with 30 tackles. He's had a couple of really big games here as of late. I think people will try to maybe test him a little bit more. He's been beat for a touchdown, but I think DeCamp's a guy that's willing to come up there on the edge and pop somebody. A little bit farther down the list, of course, Jalen Green with 22 tackles, Tyra Sweet with 22 tackles. And Sam Pittman said this week how much he liked our linebacker group. I like them too, and I like them better now than I did maybe a month ago because we do have some depth. Of course, Deshaun Page is still banged up, but J.P. Purvis stepping in and doing some good things. I think Sherman Timms is having a really good year this year. All right, your most prolific pass rushers, we're going to face a couple of them this weekend. Drew Sanders, linebacker from Arkansas, leads the SEC with 7 sacks this year. They like to bring him. Will Anderson, future first-round picks, got 5. And then there's Jordan Dominique from Arkansas with 5 too. And you know that Arkansas gets after the quarterback. And a lot of that too, I think, is a byproduct of the fact that they understand they can't just sit back. And I think we'll see a lot of pressure on third down. I don't know how much we see in the early downs. But I've read and heard some things, and people are like, well, I think that they'll bring a lot of pressure. Well, I think it's got to be measured opportunities. Because if you don't get home, you leave a very leaky secondary in man coverage. It's just kind of how it works. And so you got to pick your poison. If you blitz all the time and State's able to pick it up, it could be a very, very lopsided ball game. And I think when you look at what Odom has done in recent years, and they've won the last 2, right? So it's not like they can say, hey, defensively it's not working, even though Will had a pretty good ball game against them last year. They're not going to reinvent the wheel. Now, they probably saw what LSU has done. They probably saw what Alabama did last year. And I'm sure they'll overload the tackles at times and really bring the heat. And we're going to have to be looking for the hot route there. Got to find that inside slant. And with the safety coming, the middle of the field ought to be open. But the reality of it is that, this is a secondary that has really struggled to stop the pass. One of the worst in the country. We talked about that on Wednesday. Boogie Watson leads the Mississippi State Bulldogs with 3 sacks. He's not too far off the pace there. Drew Sanders is doing an excellent job. Could be a first rounder. Mel Kiper, I think, put him in his mock draft in the first round this week. But Boogie Watson there with 3. Randy Charlton with a couple. Nathan Pickering with 2. Colin Duncan with 2. J.P. Purvis with 2. And that's just last week. It'll be interesting. I'm eager to see what happens with this group this week. This Arkansas defense. All right, Carrington Valentine from Kentucky leads the SEC, actually tied with Kool-Aid McKinstry with 7 pass deflections. You got to get down the list just a little bit. Tied for 3rd there is Emmanuel Forbes with 4. Interceptions should come as no surprise. Emmanuel Forbes tied for 1st in the SEC, but tied with Dwight McGlothern at Arkansas, former LSU Tiger. Having a pretty good year out there. Arguably their best defensive back at this point. And with the injuries they've had, somebody's got to make some plays. He's done a pretty good job there. They'll get tested this weekend. Drew Sanders, Arkansas, also with a couple of forced fumbles this year. Latavius Brainey, that's a guy that's been a little bit up and down at times. Also on these numbers as well. But again, you run through these numbers, and I think your Bulldogs are doing a good job. They're competing, they're representing well among the the top players in the conference at their position. And that we hadn't always been able to say that. Maybe one or two guys here and there, but you look in the top 10 in just about every statistical category, there's a Bulldog there. And I think, again, that's a measure of this program and this team really beginning to mature. That's the thing you look at and you get excited about is you begin to think, okay, these guys are growing up right before our eyes. And then, I think about how it's a different wide receiver every week. Justin Robinson was a breakout star last week. Rara, of course, had the big game, but, you never know who's going to step up that maybe somebody's not expecting. And I think that makes Mississippi State very difficult to defend. I think that's a big part of all of this. It's difficult to defend Mississippi State because you can't key on one guy. All right, final segment of the show brought to you by Portico. I've told you guys many times before that if I was moving to Starkville now, I would move to Portico. No question about it. To be that close to campus would be a dream. 1.1 miles away from all things maroon. Close enough that all your friends and neighbors and everybody can come and see you on their way to town when they're coming to ball games. And maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want a little privacy. But wouldn't it be great to be able to have all the grandkids under one roof and make that your ball game weekend retreat? Maybe make Grandpa and Grandma's house the game day stop. It's time you had a place in Starkville. Whether it's your permanent residence, your future retirement home, perhaps your second home, Portico's got a place to fit you. 2-bedroom, 2-bath home, all the way up to a 4-bedroom, 4-bath home. Phase 1 now completely sold out. Phase 2 under construction. Some of those homes are already sold too. But now is the time to start gathering some information. Now is the time to think about making that move to Starkville, that long-awaited and much-anticipated move back to Starkville. Let me give you my friend Brooks Bryan's number. He's my friend, your friend, a friend of Mississippi State. Brooks can get you more information, 601-416-8075. Again, 601-416-8075. There are a lot of places in Starkville to live. There are. But one of the things that I love about this whole Portico thing is the traffic. I can avoid a lot of the traffic in town if I live there because you're conveniently located right there off of 12, near 82. There's that great neighborhood market right across the street from you. But I can pull out of my driveway and get on 12 and I'm on campus in just a matter of minutes. I don't have to fight all that on 12. And if I want to get around and go to the big Walmart, I can jump up on my 82 and bypass all that traffic. That's a nice feature that I don't think people fully appreciate. As a guy that lived in Baton Rouge for 16 years, I can tell you, I've been around some traffic. And it will probably shorten my life if I had to live in a major city because I just don't handle that well. My anxiety gets just through the roof. And so you could be close to campus. You could have the ability to avoid a lot of the traffic on game day or any other day, really, for that matter, just because you live so close to 82. So be sure and check it out. Make Portico your next move. All right, let me spend my last few minutes with you guys making my earnest plea about coming to the ball game tomorrow. I'm not going to sit here and preach. I'm just going to, again, reiterate, Mississippi State needs you to be here. It's a big ball game. A lot of speculation about what's going to happen with KJ Jefferson. We don't know for sure if he's going to play. He is going to make the trip. They'll bring his pads with him. It may be a game-time decision. It may be a situation where Sam Pittman's playing some games in the media. I don't know. But even if KJ Jefferson plays, having not practiced this week, apparently having some concussion symptoms, we don't expect him to be at 100%. Should he play? That's not my decision to make. I don't know all the details behind all of this. I know that the people are hypersensitive to this head injury stuff in football, especially after what happened last weekend with Tua. I still expect Mississippi State to win the game. But the thing that I would, again, kind of hold up is that we don't get a lot of these opportunities to gather as a family at Davis Wade Stadium and cheer the Bulldogs on the victory in a big game. And listen, I know this matchup has lost a little bit of its luster with Arkansas losing the last two. But we have lost the last two games to those guys. And games that we shouldn't have lost, but we lost them. And so maybe you could be the difference in putting us over the hump. I think we're going to win. And I think it's important to bring the kids and let them kind of get used to being around campus. You know, when we talk about building this fan base for the future, I think normalizing making trips to Starkville and making memories together and packing the car and going and cheering for the Dogs, I think it's an amazing, amazing thing. I know that I think about all those times that I went with my dad, and it wasn't that often. And back in those days, we played some games in Jackson. We didn't always get to make the trip up to Starkville to watch the Bulldogs play. But when we did, I remembered it. And to this day, those memories are very precious to me. And so I think your kids want to go to the ball game. I know you want to go to the ball game. But it's worth the time and trouble. And there's a lot of tickets out there on the third-party market that's very inexpensive. Of course, there are tickets available to the Mississippi State ticket office. I bought some this week for my brother and his family. And so I just encourage you to be here. If you can be here, and I know many of you have activities on Friday night. I know. You got kids in the band, you got cheerleaders in your family, you got football players. It's a real challenge to get here for an early morning kick. But if you can be here, please be here. And if you can't be here, let's ensure we get our tickets in the hand of some Bulldog fans. Maybe there's a family down the street. Maybe there's somebody you know from your church group or somebody from work. And maybe they can't afford to take these trips. So you know what? I'm going to gift my tickets to them. Maybe even give them a little gas money, whatever. But we need Bulldogs in the stands. And it feels kind of weird to have to do that. You know, I think the university is doing all they can, but it feels weird to have to kind of say, hey, guys, it's a big game. We need you here. And I know that COVID kind of got a lot of us out of the habit of going. I get it. I understand it. But it's time for us to kind of get back to what we love. I know many of you have exhausted extensive resources to build your man cave, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to watch ball games here. I get that too. But Mississippi State needs you here. We need you here. And I tell you, I love it when you guys come to town. I've shared that with you guys before. I live here. I love living here. But the electricity and the excitement that you guys bring to town is amazing. I love living here. I do. And I'm here until the end. That's my plan anyway, you know. But the reality of it is that it's kind of like, you know, like when you find out your favorite uncle and your favorite aunt are coming to grandma's house. And all week long you're like, oh, I get to see my cousins, you know. That's how it is for me when you all are coming to Starkville. I love it. And I love the fact that we're all gathering together as a family and uniting under one banner of maroon and white to celebrate Mississippi State athletics. It's a special thing. And listen, I've never been a part of any other fan base, right? Not in college. I've only had one college team my whole life. Many of you are the same way. I don't know that I had a choice. But I'd rather be a Bulldog than anything else. And I tell you, I was talking to some people last night in Huntsville. They love Alabama, but they admit it gets kind of boring. And I guess that's probably true. It gets kind of boring. It's difficult to get up for these ball games when you always know you're going to win. Oh, you know, cry me a river, right? But that's the thing, is when you never know when you're going to have that special moment at Davis Wade Stadium or Duty Noble Field or Humphrey Coliseum. You never know when that special moment's going to come. That moment you look back and say, you know what? I was there when that happened. Maybe it's this weekend. I hope not. I hope it's a game that we get ahead early and we can just kind of cruise. But I'll be honest with you, this Arkansas defense, you know, they have some pieces. They just don't have any cohesion. But is this a week they kind of put it together? Because they're going to try to win this game, I think, running the football and playing defense. They're going to try to keep the air raid offense on the sidelines. And so we can't afford to make mistakes. We can't afford to give them extra possessions. They're going to try to shorten the game on us because I think they realize if they can't get stops, that this is going to be a ball game that gets out of hand. It could be very quickly. When you begin to think about, you know, Mississippi State as a football program, we discussed earlier in the show about how well we're scoring compared to what we have in previous years. And every year, exponentially, you've seen it gone up. I think that's important to understand that this thing is beginning to really take hold here. And so if you're on the fence, let me encourage you to get off the fence. Get on the healthstate.com website, go to StubHub, wherever you want to go, and make sure that you get some tickets to come to this ball game. You know, it's so interesting. One of the Arkansas beat writers pointed this out, and it was a stat that had kind of eluded me. Mississippi State has dominated the first quarter this year. Do you know how many points Mississippi State's given up in the first quarter this year? Anybody want to take a stab at that? It's 7. And that was at Arizona. On that very first drive, we didn't fit a gap, and they gashed us and ran for a touchdown. Here are your first quarter scores. 14-0 against Memphis. 15-7 against Arizona. 6-0 against LSU. 17-0 against Bowling Green. And, of course, no score last week. We always talk about getting off to a good start. You know, State's been able to do that more times than not. We have not faced a first quarter deficit at the end of the quarter the entire year. That's interesting to me. And I think this weekend we can make that really mean more. Look at our second quarter scoring too. 14-3 against Memphis. 3-3 against Arizona. 7-7 against LSU. 14-7 against Bowling Green. And 14-0 against A&M. So not only are we winning the first quarter, we're winning the second quarter. So come out and be a part of this. It's going to be an important weekend. I don't know if you realize this. We could be 5-1 after this weekend. And so, yeah, but see, we got Kentucky. Yeah, let's just focus on Arkansas. We can get ahead of ourselves, right? But 5-1 gets you inside the top 20 more than likely, which sets up a big game next weekend against Kentucky. And you just start thinking about, you know, the totality of the season and the fact that we could be playing for some pretty cool things. We are taking the next step as a program. Year one under Leach, you know, was difficult to judge anybody, right? And I remember so many people were jumping all over the bandwagon about, Arkansas made the better hire. You know, Sam Pittman's so much farther ahead. And, of course, it was a bigger rebuild, to be fair. And we had to make some adjustments, obviously, at Mississippi State. But Sam Pittman's 15-13. 15-13 now. 3-7, 9-4, 3-2. So, again, we talk back about grading those hires. I don't know. I think at this point, maybe you tip the cap to Lane Kiffin. He's probably, done the best so far. And we'll see how the rest of the season goes. But there were so many people that were panning the Mike Leach hire after, year and a half and praising the Sam Pittman hire. But I think now when you look at things, I think Mike Leach and Mississippi State are closing ground. And maybe we shouldn't have lost ground in the first place, but we did. But I think, again, you got to look at these things. You can't look at a snapshot. You got to look at the totality of the situation. Look forward to seeing you guys at Davis Wade Stadium on Saturday. If you hadn't done so, go to dogpiletobook.com. You can get all my sports books there. You get signed, personalized copies. Dogpile, Stark Villains, Alpha Dogs, Flim Flam. Sold a lot of Flim Flam on Monday. We were down in Gulfport. And I really appreciate that. I really, really, really do. I think we sold probably more Flim Flam than we did anything else combined. It was great. We sold a few Dogpile. But we sold a bunch of Flim Flam. And so I appreciate those guys. Many of them said, Steve, you never get down here. That's true. We don't do a lot of book signings down south. But when we do, you folks show up. So I appreciate that. Bloomsville Leander, of course, available at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, BooksAMillion.com. That was just kind of my pet project. It was never anything that I thought would become anything special, and it has. And so I appreciate your support of that. Stark Villains gear always available at StarkVillains.com. Matter of fact, I got to run by there and pick up a shirt a little bit later today. So thank you guys so much for your support. We look forward to having you in town. Look forward to a great weekend. Hopefully we're talking about a Bulldog victory on Monday. Would be huge, huge, huge. And when you look at the circumstances behind this game, it's a game Mississippi State is expected to win. So let's go take care of business. Until next time, we'll all see you. And let me get that straight, right? We'll see you this weekend. And until next time, let's all live our lives in a way we make more friends than enemies, and people can see a difference in the way we live.